You ever have one of those days where, you wake up from a coma and then all of a sudden you just realize that you're surrounded in a world filled with flesh-craving creatures that were once human? No? Just me? No. Anyway, welcome to the Panel Zone podcast with Zach and Ari. Today's episode, we will be delving into the crazy world of the Walking Dead franchise with our very special guest, Tim Bevins.
Welcome to the Panel Zone.
Alright, so can we ask you?
Where are we? You're in the Panel Zone.
Are you sure you are not a superhero or extremely gifted person?
Welcome to the Panel Zone. Welcome
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Panel Zone, recorded here live at the wonderful, wonderful Patrick Comics in Hilliard, Ohio. I'm your host, Zachary. I left my map at home, Cobb.
I'm Ari, oh God, what am I gonna do? Levinson.
I'm Tim doing your mom, Bevins. Told you I was gonna say it. Told you I was
A
gonna say
man of
it.
conviction?
Yes,
My
sir.
man is committed to the bit, and I'm here
I
for
love
it.
the conviction of it. So I think before we start about talking about the comic we're gonna talk about, we should promote a comic book that we think people should read.
So my comic promotion is the Superior Spider-Man run by Dan Slott. I picked it mainly because it is horror adjacent, but it's not really. But I also really like the journey of Doc Ock trying to learn how to be a good guy. So if you want to read some really cool horror adjacent, not really stuff, give this a read.
I must confess that I'm not reading that many series right now, but I will promote the one that I've been reading, the Image line of Transformers comics. It actually has some pretty dark and grisly arts considering they're robots. I mean, look at the cover. This is like a disembodied torso of a robot because of horrible stuff that was done to him. And it's a really cool run. The characters are done really well in new ways that different from Transformers media before. It's refreshing, and I highly recommend you give it a read.
And I'm here promoting my own book, Inking Under Pressure. Me and Joshua Myers, we worked on it together. This is mainly for young artists, young in their career. It's kind of like an art book, inspirational book, just to help y'all push along and keep going. You can get that on my website, creaturesbytim.com.
And speaking of comics, today's topic is, of course, the amazing Walking Dead. So, quick question. What is everyone's experience with The Walking Dead?
Trauma.
Straight to the point. Like you said.
Disappointment. Okay, that's
Intrigue.
That's a bit of a negative note. Here's the first compendium. You can notice that in The Walking Dead, it has a distinct style of being black and white. Although recently, in terms of recent serialization, there's The Walking Dead Deluxe. If you want to support the comic book like on a monthly basis, support The Walking Dead Deluxe books, which are just re-releases of the comic in color. But let's go from comic to the game, since they're comic adjacent,
Yeah.
to the TV show. So let's start off with the comic first. I recently binged the entire comic book, and I'll give my thoughts on it. The Image comic compared to the show is quicker pace. Stuff happens quicker because the show can be bloated with filler content because
Yeah.
it's TV.
Of course.
But there is some notable differences, such as, for instance, later in the show, Judith kind of becomes an important character, Rick Grimes' daughter, but in a comic, she dies at the prison in a pretty gruesome way for a newborn baby to die.
That was pretty
Family
When I
entertainment.
saw that, I'm like,
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. The governor is far more unhinged.
yeah.
He's a repugnant individual. There isn't really like a villain outside of Shane until the governor in both the comic book and the show. The governor is a far more unhinged character.
Yep.
Negan is done better because he can actually be funny, unlike in the show where the FCC limits like swearing and stuff. He says fuck a lot in the comic, and it doesn't feel excessive because it's so ludicrous and funny how he talks. And he has a good character arc, unlike in the show where they just continue with spin-off shows and don't conclude his character. He got a really good character arc and conclusion in the book, and the story ended as it should. It didn't feel dragged on.
Right.
And Carl kind of shifted to becoming the main character towards the end of the book compared to Rick, or kind of like a dual protagonist.
Yeah.
So Carl died in the show. That's what got me to stop watching. But he didn't die in the comic, and that is probably the biggest difference in terms of story quality that I can vouch for, because he gets more character development. He has to adjust from a period of brutally surviving to civilization as he grows older, and that doesn't always click with the people trying to rebuild society towards the later end of the book.
Yeah.
And Whisper War's pretty good. It ended quickly. Honestly, they're hyped up to be a big threat, but they're not as big of a threat as they're hyped up to be, which I don't think is a bad thing, because when you're seasoned survivors, you should be equipped to prepare for threats like that. I mean, new ways of life will happen with Calamity.
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts on the series. It's similar to the show. It's a bit quicker. The series actually ends. It doesn't drag off into spin-off shows. And it ends on...
there are spin-off comics.
There are spin-off comics, but that's more like prequel stories about characters before they join the main group, or like Negan prequel comic, the Tyrese prequel comic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it ended with this awesome speech about "We Are Not the Walking Dead" that Rick Grimes made, which was a polar opposite to the story or the speech he made at the prison, where he was in a darker place, all about you kill, you die, which he ends up kind of rethinking as he grows more wise with experience and grows into his leadership position. And then he makes a similar speech towards the end, saying, "We don't have to just live. We don't have to just survive. We can live. We are not the Walking Dead." His entire...
He said the thing.
I know he said the thing. Roll credits. But it entirely shows how much he's grown as a character. He is a really good character. And if you're in it for action and brutal scenes, the comic still has plenty of that. Lots of shock value here, but none of it is done manipulatively like the show does.
It feels intentional.
It feels intentional. It feels like it's part of the story. It's shocking, but also blends into the story. And there's also no Glenn fake out death, which was immensely cringe.
Very cringe. My favorite part of the comic is when Michonne stabbed the mayor. That was
the governor?
I meant the governor. Yeah, I like that. It felt very cathartic after, especially reading up to all the awful things that he's done.
I love that she cut off his penis.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. She basically
That's
castrated.
my girl. She a baddie. Speaking of legacy, I think this is a good transition point to talk about the Telltale video games, which is my entry point into the Walking Dead series. So Telltale Games, for those who don't know, is a choose-your-own game video game developers. They've been around since like late 90s. They've done a lot of other franchise stuff like Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Sam and Max, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's their like legacy classic content.
But like even though the Jurassic Park games was the game that initially started that Telltale formula, the Walking Dead games are what put them on the map. So you get to play as different characters throughout the story, but the main viewpoint is from the character of Lee Everett, who is a college professor turned convicted criminal after he killed the man who had an affair with his wife. And he finds out this takes place during the start of the outbreak of the zombie apocalypse. And
it starts roughly when the comic starts, pretty much. And again, it takes place in that shared universe, and that's demonstrated with the presence of characters such as Glenn in the first season and Jesus in the third.
Yeah. But like majority of the rest of them are like original characters.
Which expands the world.
Yeah.
It makes it feel more full, more colorful, more like it's real.
Exactly. Like you get to spend as much time with them, but it feels the stakes are still there where like anybody could die in that moment. So you get to experience how people deal with the situation of the outbreak, how your chemistry with other through the choices that you make impact the story going forward. And that's what I really loved about these games in the first place, with how much the choices like really impact what you do with the story going forward, and how the characters will view you, because each choice does matter. The choices lessen over the course of the other seasons, but the first one especially.
Really, second season's impactful with how they do the ending structure.
The end. I think definitely the ending of season 2 is more impacts that a lot, because there's a lot of alternative endings that they have after that. But later on, like 3 and 4 don't really have that.
They don't have diverging paths or stories.
Yeah.
Actually, 4, I'll make an entirely separate comment on that. 3 is the worst the series has to offer.
Yes.
But first, actually, I do want to mention that The Walking Dead has a distinct art style that I feel really puts it on the map as a comic book and as a series.
It's very sketchy and gritty, but it has a lot of pop out elements of it.
And the Telltale Games, maybe not season 3, because they did this weird glossy style.
Yeah.
That was in it. But like seasons 1, 2, and 4, they share that art style, and especially in remasters, they even improved upon it, and it really makes it feel like it's all happening in the same place, both in terms of just world building and like, oh, this could be a comic book.
Exactly.
This could be a comic book, a very cool comic book.
Yes, a playable comic book at that. Like I really liked how they implement, especially in the remaster, with how they kept that art. They really implemented on each season to keep that same art style, and so it's none of that gross glossy shit.
It's not the worst they could have done, but like it certainly was.
It's very noticeable with the style change.
I mean, I've watched some YouTube videos of multiple people giving story ideas that would have instantly improved season 3, and it felt like Telltale just roped themselves into the corner.
Well, to be fair, Telltale was already spreading themselves thin with doing so many other projects. They were doing a Batman, they did a Game of Thrones, they did a Guardians of the Galaxy. They were still trying to do that at the same time, working on The Walking Dead and balancing too much, and that's why they initially closed down, because they were spreading themselves too thin.
And they weren't making any return on their investment.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't even really play the Game of Thrones, Guardians of the Galaxy stuff anymore for the most part. It's not accessible. Like, the most accessible series that you could get into, like nowadays, is the Wolf Among Us,
Tales
the
of the
Batman, the Batman series, and all of that.
Yeah.
And their recent new game, The Expanse, of which I have no impression.
No idea.
No idea. I don't know if it's good or bad. Never played it. Haven't watched a playthrough. Hasn't really stuck out to me. Yeah. I know it's based off a book, I think.
Yeah, the sci-fi series.
Do you have experience playing the Telltale games?
I played like barely any of it. I'll just be real. I remember a little bit of like the girl and the guy. I don't even remember their names.
Oh, Lee Clementine.
Clementine. Yeah, that's. I played it a little bit when it first came out because it was the hype, and then it's just I'm not that kind of gamer.
No, you're kind of
I play like Call of Duty Zombies, or I play like.
You like
zombie Jason stuff
kind of games.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it is a choose your own story kind of game, which is definitely an acquired taste of game.
Yeah, that just happens to have zombies in it.
Alright, Jake, can you ask me?
Do you want to mention the Clementine comic?
There's just so much. It's not worth talking. It's by Tilly Walden. It's a sequel comic to season 4. It has Clementine abandoning the school to go to what, Utah?
Yeah.
Utah for what?
No reason. It is
she
just
randomly decides
she just needs time for herself, guys.
She needs to not be the single mom that she's been built up to be since season 2. Just randomly abandoned that. AJ, no one in the school gets mentioned. AJ just says goodbye without any big argument or stir. Like he would be okay with that, even though Clementine said, I can't really move that much anymore. If I get in a big fight, I will likely have to be left behind or die. It's actually a huge thing she's scared about at the end of season 4, and they completely ignore it because she has a peg leg now, and that fixes everything. It makes no sense. And I haven't even read the whole series, but that beginning alone and such disrespect to her character makes the book not worth reading. Don't read it. Do not support it. Because that means they consider to make more of them, and we don't want it. Tilly Walden, that was a terribly written book, and I really don't believe you played the games or got their message.
I do. I have read the book, and yes, I can attest that it is one of the biggest cases of character assassination that I've ever read in a comic book. The fact alone that Clem would do stuff like that is just already off on a wrong note as is. Clem would never ever do half the stuff that she does in this book. And some may argue about it being an Elseworld thing, but even if that were the case, that's not.
Tilly Walden wrote it with the full intention of fans accepting it as the canon continuation of her story, which is completely ludicrous. I do not accept it, and I do not accept your work.
Do better.
You don't want it, man.
I don't want that.
I don't
get that out of my face.
You wrote a terrible book, and I bought your book, and I immensely wish I could get that money back. And the time it took for me to read it.
You could burn it in the yard.
Or have
it looks nice on it looks nice on the bookshelf. I could give
that
it
stain is there forever, so I don't know if that's really a compliment.
Yeah, it looks good on a bookshelf. It's a good filler.
It's a warning. That's what you leave off to scare off burglars. You just left the comic there, and it's like,
steal this, please. Steal this.
Don't even bother with money. Just take this.
I paid for it, so I'm gonna keep it. But I still regret reading it, and I was so excited for it too. I was so looking for it, but trying to make it's the same issue season 3 faced with having a bunch of different endings or different choices. It's hard to make a single story that can be adapted. The only way you can continue the story is by making another game.
Exactly.
It's the only medium that works, in my opinion. And season 2 to season 3 is the biggest reason why having multiple different endings was so difficult to write around.
Exactly.
And why they had to have an entirely new character so Clementine could be integrated into the story more organically. And even then, because they didn't have the resources to flesh out the story, it just resulted in her not showing up that often.
And just made things even more confusing.
Alright, good. Can you ask me?
We've talked about the Telltale Games a lot. I say we talk about the television show now in more detail. This is where you talk, because you actually have some experience with the TV show. We've kind of been yapping a bunch, and we want to hear your thought on the television show.
I didn't know much about the Telltale Games, but the TV show, man, me and my family would get together whenever there was.
It was an event. It was like a cultural phenomenon.
It was amazing.
Oh yeah.
We would all sit around in the living room, watch it every day. Well,
every week.
Sunday, was it?
Yeah, every Sunday. And then they have Talking Dead afterwards, where they talk about the episode.
Yeah,
like,
they do the Talking Dead.
Chris Hardwick is an awesome host for that show.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting overall. I know I always forget his name because I'm so far removed from it at this point, but the motorcycle guy?
Daryl.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I always
Daryl
confused
Dixon.
him.
Also, television exclusive character. He was not in the comic books.
Wasn't in the comic, but I did love him. I loved him and his brother. I felt like I've ran into
Merle.
I've ran into
Merle
them
Dixon.
before in my life. Some crazy white boys. I've ran into that plenty of times in my life.
You know, the apocalypse kind of makes him a more tolerant person, actually.
It's like, you know what? I kind of want the crazy redneck with me now.
Right.
You might help me survive.
You might have a purpose here.
Yeah, but
I feel like for me the weirdest part was towards the middle of the prison arc with the phone stuff. I know that happens in the comic, but that happens after the prison arc. And that part lost me a little bit when Rick's talking to himself, basically.
Well, talking to his wife via his own delusions. That phone bit goes on for quite a while in the comics. I forgot if it went up until Alexandria in the show. I forgot if it stopped earlier in the show. It's been a while since I've watched it myself, nor do I intend to rewatch it because I know how the decline it went through and it makes it not worth it to watch. Kind of like I know how Game of Thrones ends poorly, so I'm never gonna watch it. But the phone scene, I kind of thought that it was a good demonstration of how the mental health of people. They never really leaned into that again that much outside of like the Michonne Telltale game with her delusions.
Yeah.
They don't lean into that as much. And honestly, I didn't mind the experimental move that was because the man lost everything at that point, and I would think that would drive someone definitely somewhat
less
crazy.
sane than they already are.
And then they got this big group they got to look after, so they got all this responsibility, and it's it doesn't seem unrealistic, but definitely was a weirder artistic choice.
Yeah.
But I can understand why that wouldn't appeal to everybody.
I just feel like it was better in the comics than it was.
Oh, it was better in the comics.
It felt just like a weird point because in the comics he lost Lori and the baby, and in the show he lost his girl Lori, but he still had his son.
Yeah,
and
he
his
still had
baby.
both his son and his daughter.
You got a newborn. You ain't got time to.
I would think that would inspire you to be better. There was less a reason to be sane. And plus, Lori in the comics and in the show is an annoying ass character. She is insufferable at times. And for the Apocalypse, you think you'd show a little more humility, but like, damn, she is so naggy the whole time, acting like she knows better than everyone else. And her portrayal of Rick via Shane, she's relatively shameless for a decent period of time before they decide to acknowledge it. And then they don't even really talk about it because Rick can't deal with it. He's hurt like this, and it's just a profound demonstration. Like, she's written to be this way, but like, damn, it doesn't mean I don't feel what the writers wanted me to feel, which was pure annoyance at her existence.
Well, here on the flip side of things, so something I think the TV show did better in a way than the comic was the whole Rick and Shane thing. That build up, that fight of them. It went on to the farm, all that. I thought it was really fun.
It was a shorter conflict in the book, and like it was still there. Also, who's the actor who played Shane?
You talk about the bearded guy?
Yeah.
He's the guy who plays the Punisher.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
I don't remember his name, but he was
I'm sure
perfect.
Editor me will fill in that blank.
Well, we'll probably fill in that blank after we're done recording, but he played Shane perfectly. They could not have chosen a better actor for Shane.
I know why they sped it up in the comics. Do you guys know why?
I don't.
To get this published by Image, first they had a speed run in the beginning. And they also told Image, aliens are going to come in at some point.
Oh yeah, I know. I remember that.
What?
Aliens were going to aliens were originally going to be written. It wasn't supposed to be a mystery. It was supposed to be aliens were the cause of the zombie virus.
Well, it was fake to get Image to publish it. He lied. Who's the writer's name?
Robert Kirkman?
Robert Kirkman lied to get Image to publish it. Him and the penciler. I always forget the penciler's name too.
It's usually
Robert Kirkman, Charlie Adler, Tony Moore,
and Charlie
Cliff
Adler.
Rathburn.
Yep, they all lied to get it published. It's like, yeah, because they didn't want a zombie thing at that time. It was like zombies are overdone, whatever. Who would like this?
Only for them to realize that they wrote something so impactful it became a global television phenomenon with 17 million viewers weekly at the prime of its run. There's not really been a show as impactful as Walking Dead when it was on TV.
Real.
There's a lot of popular television now, but nothing approaches that because it was before big streaming and all of that, where it felt like an event. You get your whole family together. That's what I did. I'd watch it with my mom, my dad, and my brother, and then we watch Talking Dead afterwards. We get the stamp a bit later. I started watching it, granted, I probably shouldn't have watched it when I was a kid. But eventually I got back into it when I was able to not be freaked out by it. And I've liked it since I was an older kid, young teenager. I've loved this series for a decent chunk of my life. And it was an event. It felt so good to be a fan. There were miniature apps made with Walker filters and stuff, and everyone would post on social media about them and everything. I remember that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess the moral of that story is tell a white lie sometimes.
Yeah?
Be like, yeah.
And you too can have your own multi-million-dollar franchise.
You too can do it.
Yeah, just make sure you know some Image executives too.
Exactly. I'm still hoping for the Rocket Dog TV show that Robert Kirkman has not done yet.
Is that based off of the dog superhero Invincible?
Yeah, that was a comic he did before Invincible. That was
Rocket Dog?
Yeah, that was his first book that he did for Image. Hello, everyone. This is Editor Zach. I just wanted to clarify that Rocket Dog was not, in fact, the first Robert Kirkman project he worked on at Image Comics. It was, in fact, Tech Jacket. Even though technically he worked as a writer on the Savage Dragon book before he did his own thing. So just wanted to clarify that information. Now back to the episode.
Did Invincible come before Walking Dead or after Walking Dead?
After, because that was kind of like his. Walking Dead was kind of like his big breakthrough of Image. Robert Kirkman had already worked for like Marvel and DC and stuff like that prior, but like he was mainly known for like doing independent stuff with web comics. But before this, he was already friends with Charlie Adlard, and he's like, hey man, I got an idea. Let's do a zombie thing. And they're like, okay, let's do it. And
I think they did like an April Fool's thing about the zombies, or like a spin-off issue about it. I don't know for sure, but I definitely do remember hearing about the whole alien thing.
I never knew about the alien thing. That's crazy.
During my research for this podcast, I stumbled upon it.
Big brain, I appreciate that.
It was a studio tour with Adlard, and he actually wasn't the first penciler. I forget the first penciler's name. He did like the first 8 issues.
They wrote Tony Moore and Cliff Rathburn on it.
It might be Rathburn, because he did the covers for like the first 24 issues. But he only the first penciler only penciled the first 8, and then he stopped. And that's when. So I misspoke. I wanted to clear that up.
Hello, editor Zach here again to clarify. The Walking Dead was created by Robert Kirkman and Tony Moore. Tony Moore was the original penciler before he left the book. Was replaced by Charlie Adlard for the remaining issues.
Horrible spin-offs. The comic has long since been over, and the Telltale Games have no plan of continuation, and Tilly Walden's Clementine exists.
Maybe now we need it.
I mean, if they wanted
to shake up a little formula. Who knows? Maybe that's the next big TV show.
Maybe Robert Kirkman continues working on Void Rivals and does something new, because I think this series kind of is concluded to a satisfying degree, in my opinion.
I say Robert Kirkman's already busy working on
the one you were reading out there. Yeah, he's one of the primary writers on that, which is cool because I love Transformers and Robert Kirkman, and them being together is awesome. But that's off topic. I think we reached a conclusion of talking about this series. Yeah. We got a bit in the panel zone, if you will.
If you say, as what the cool kids would say.
I know a bunch of people who say that. Trust me.
You know, at least 10.
Yeah, at least 10. 10 whole people
yes.
who say that daily. Like a prayer. I am a reliable source of information. Anyways.
Walking zombie encyclopedia.
If you want to support the Walking Dead series or read it, either buy the compendiums or buy the deluxe issues that are releasing that are just re-releases but in color. The black and white style is still pretty cool though, so don't discard it just because there's no color, because the art is still really good. Please.
Talk about that for a second. Color versus the black and white. What do you
Okay,
think?
I feel the black and white helps make it stand out a lot more.
It stands out.
Like, it's like a lot of recoloring of stuff kind of makes things weird in a lot of sense. Like, like a lot of it, like once the colors that kind of it could lose a lot of impact, but not from what I've seen of like recolorings of the comics that I've read so far of it.
Also, I'll just say that the stuff people say in the beginning is more unhinged because of like the rednecks and stuff.
Yes.
Like it becomes like less unhinged in terms of crazy people and like stuff that's said. This is not for the faint of heart. We really gotta go. The panel zone's keeping us trapped. We gotta get out.
We gotta get out of this panel zone. So, Tim, you want to promote your socials?
Yeah, support me. I'm Creatures by Tim on everything. Like Instagram, TikTok. If it's still a thing by the time this thing comes out.
Yeah. That bad boy got reverted. So we're good.
We'll see.
We'll see. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
YouTube, that's the new thing I'm focusing on. It's doing pretty well so far, so go over there, check me out, Creatures by Tim. You can also check out my website where I got my books. This is one of my shirts. I got a bunch of stuff over there. Go check it out.
All the things.
We got a certified big shot over here.
Yes, sir. Mr. Moneymaker over here.
I ain't a big shot yet unless y'all go buy some.
You can also listen.
Then we can keep talking.
Hey, the green language is the best kind of language.
All right.
You want to talk? You can also listen to my podcast, Zach's Artful Podcast, wherever podcasts are available. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where this podcast will also be up. Do you have anything before?
Yeah, it will be uploaded both to me and Zach's YouTube channel. So there's twice as many places for you to see it. It'll be on where podcast goes. Please support Pack Rat Comics. They have allowed us to record here, and we will be recording here indefinitely until we are told we're not to, or until we decide to record elsewhere. But please support Pack Rat Comics.
Any local comic book business.
Any local comic book business, because we don't get comics unless they get the funds to make them, and that's important. And we don't have businesses like this unless they have the funds to keep selling the books.
Speak with your wallet, folks.
Yep, because that's the only way you get more. Thank you for tuning in. Panel Zone.
Bye, motherfuckers.